Hey everyone, so for this video today, I wanted to cover some subjects that a lot of people have been asking me. They've been, tuning into the stream and asking, what do I want from the Shrouded Affix? What do I want for talents and legendary and stuff like that? How are things changing for Feral in this season? So I wanted to make a video on that and then also just give you kind of general thoughts from me on Feral Druid this season. From my perspective and how it's been performing so far in the first 2 weeks, and I want to caveat some stuff, so we'll talk about that. So starting off, when it comes to Feral Druid this season, nothing's really changed from a gameplay standpoint. We haven't had any buffs or nerfs. All that's happened is we've lost However, by losing that's actually devalued Frenzy Band a little bit, because before we were getting Berserks a lot more often, which meant that Frenzy Band had just intrinsically more value because you're actually proccing it so much more often, right? But now that we're losing we're not going to be seeing that as much, so that's technically gotten a little bit of a nerf, but it honestly, in the grand scheme, is maybe a couple of Berserks difference, like maybe 1 or 2 Berserks difference in a whole key, right? Well, probably like 2 to 3, so it's not the end of the world, but this is where Apex probably steps up a little bit more now in Mythic Plus as a nice, solid alternative. And is something that I'm particularly I feel strongly about for this dungeon, Iron Docks. So Frenzy Band in general is still a really, really good legendary, and something that I would advise you to use in general, and particularly in Tyrannical weeks. I think Frenzy Band is still pretty good. I've been finding some pretty solid damage from it, and it's not just the damage, it's the fact that it's good on AoE and on single target, which is also really nice. On Fortified, I think you can use it generally, especially on things like Upper Karazhan, Workshop, those more single target heavy style dungeons. I think it's very fine to just, throw on the Frenzy Band and go. Now, Apex itself, I think, is a good legendary whenever you want funnel. Whenever you want to, and some people don't know what funnel is, whenever you want to be able to do more damage to a single target by introducing additional mobs to combat. So obviously, the more mobs that are affected by your Primal Wrath Rip means you're going to get more chances of proccing your Apex, which you can then use as Apex procs to pump Ferocious Bites into a particular mob. And so, for me, Apex is a good general legendary, something that I think you can realistically just choose to play if you want to. It's a bit of choice right now when it comes to Feral. But I think in Iron Docks, Apex is particularly strong when you look at how the dungeon is actually formatted. And that is, the first boss is a 2-target cleave. The second boss is a 3-target cleave. The third boss is multi-target cleave at points in the fight. And then the last boss is 2 to 3 target cleave. 2-target cleave as well. So every single boss has cleave elements to it, but not only that, but when you're on the first boss, you want to focus the wolf. When you're on the second boss, you want to focus the caster. So you do actually want to funnel onto a particular mob. So it goes hand in hand with that naturally. And then of course you have things like Zolgamux here, which that benefits from having Apex, because you can funnel additional mobs into more Apex bites on Zolgamux to make sure it dies as quickly as possible, and you're reducing that shield down as quickly as possible. So I think Apex is particularly really strong in this dungeon. It's also not super ad heavy. You may be pulling anywhere from 4 to 8 mobs at a time. It's not completely uncapped, in which case I think Apex is just particularly strong in this dungeon. And yeah, I think I'm going to be using Apex in this every single week. Now, the final legendary that I think is worth talking about is Circle of Life and Death. Circle of Life and Death, I think, is particularly going to be strong on Fortified weeks, especially if you're playing Necrolord, if you're taking haste from your Shrouded Affix, if you're running, Savage Roar and Blood Talons and stuff like that as well. I think it'll go very, very nicely. So that's my call on Circle. I think you can play it on Tyrannical week. You can definitely still play it as Night Fae, but I think it's particularly strong as Necrolord. I've been playing it with as Night Fae, Circle of Life and Death, with Savage Roar, Sabertooth, Blood Talons in, say, Junkyard, and I actually am able to top DPS in those dungeons playing that setup. So really, really good. So Circle, Apex, or Frenzy, I think you have 3 options, and I think honestly any of them are good. You can mix and match, you can throw any of them in, and you'll do, all of them will do well and perform well. But just be smart, think about the dungeon. Is it single target heavy? Frenzy Band's probably the play. Is it cleave? Probably Apex. Is it big AoE? Probably Circle. Just be sensible in how you put that together, right? Because another thing that I didn't actually mention, and this is a bit of a side note here, nice little bonus, but something I didn't mention is with the removal of other people are technically like getting these nerfs now as well from not having so a lot of specs that were reliant on for big cooldown usage and boss damage, they're actually losing that. And Feral's actually stepping into this nice single target niche. Not only that, but the dungeons have changed, and you have Upper Karazhan, you have Workshop, you have Streets. There's another one I can't think of off the top of my head, but there's like 3 or 4 very heavy single target dungeons out of 8 dungeons possible. So 50% of the dungeons, you can actually get some really good single target value from Feral Druid. So just be sensible with it, be smart about it, think about the dungeon when you come into legendaries. So that then brings me on to the Shrouded Affix and what you want to do there. And I would say that in general, you only want haste or crit. You're never going to take mastery because of the way that you're DRing on it. It gives you a flat value rather than percentage. You D on it pretty heavy, so it's not worth taking. I think versatility is actually giving like half value. It's giving you like 1% instead of 2%, something like that. You're not going to take verse. It's either haste or crit. I believe haste is scaling multiplicatively, so haste is very good. You're actually getting more from haste than you should in theory be getting, I guess, in a way. Like, you're getting extra additional value from it, so it's quite good. So it's haste or crit for me. Obviously, if it's Junkyard, it's always haste. If I'm running Circle, it's always haste. If I'm running Apex, I kind of like the crit, because I like these big Apex crits. That, for me, is more important than, I guess, running the haste in general. And, yeah, I'm just kind of like, just be sensible with it. Just think about what you're doing. Think about your build. Think about what makes sense. Circle and haste makes sense because you're going for this bleed style, so all of your bleeds in general are going to be benefiting from this circle. And yeah, so haste or crit are my two options for that. But honestly, either way, whether you take haste or crit, you're still gonna do some good damage with it. So don't stress too much about it. I think either's good. And then to move on to, I guess, like the final aspect of what I wanted to talk about in this video is talents. And then I'll kind of go on to like bonus little discussion at the end and how Feral's generally doing. But when it comes to talents, I'm running a lot of Sabertooth, Soul of the Forest, Primal Wrath, and Blood Talons. I'm also thinking that MOC could absolutely replace Blood Talons here and it'd be totally fine. Particularly, like right now, I'm running Apex. I don't really like running Apex and Blood Talons. I just don't like it. It just doesn't feel like a nice, enjoyable kind of gameplay. Now, even though it doesn't feel good, it probably is still doing more damage, but it just doesn't feel good to me. I don't like it. So I don't play it. But if I'm ever playing Apex, I play this, as you just saw on screen, actually. Quite nice, convenient timing. And then with Circle, I play Savage Raw with that instead of Soul. I also play Sabertooth and Blood Talons. And then you get a bunch of haste, and your convokes are still really strong because you're biting in your convoke windows and you're extending your ribs, which is actually quite good on single target. And then your circle is ticking quicker, so it kind of works quite nicely having that combination. You could also run Predator, MOC, Savage Raw, Circle. I think that would be just fine as well. And then lastly, I guess with Frenzy Band, you're going to be running Savage Raw, Soul of the Forest, and Blood Talons, absolutely. So pretty much Savage Raw, Soul of the Forest, Blood Talons like default. And then there's definite scope for Predator and MOC if you want it, particularly on bosses where your Predator is going to be getting reset. You could argue this is a decent Predator dungeon as well. Things like Junkyard are good Predator dungeons. Gambit as well, actually, very good one because you get resets on every single boss as well. So yeah, there are some dungeons where I think Predator is particularly strong. That would be one of them. Well, those would be some of them. And yeah, those are kind of like the different build styles. But this is just like a quick rundown of the video. If you have more questions about those things, feel free to come check out the stream. But that should hopefully answer a lot of stuff for you in terms of combinations, legendaries, stats, all that kind of stuff that you want. And so I wanted to then speak about Feral Druid in general this patch. I think, you know, I've alluded to it earlier, speaking about the fact that everybody else is losing Also, a lot of the dungeons have shifted. We've moved on to very heavy single target dungeons. A lot of specs have just naturally lost damage from not having during bosses. So Feral Druid single target is getting bumped up a little bit. It's been like artificially increased and improved by the fact that everyone else is kind of getting a bit of a nerf from that. Season 3, we didn't really have a single target niche, which was unfortunate, and we kind of lost a bit of our identity there. But now we kind of moved back onto that single target king, which is really good. And I've been actually beating people in a lot of dungeons just purely based on, well, on everything actually, just based on the way that dungeons are designed. But I was talking to stream today, and I was saying, like, guys, do you find that I am more often than not top DPS in dungeons? Like, do you find that just most of, like, I remember season 3, I was competing for tank damage, right? I was trying to beat the tank. This season, I'm more often than not, I'm first in dungeons. And actually, I played with the same group. I know you're looking now at the DPS meter, and it's like, oh, well, yeah. But we go and do a junkyard, and I get first in the junkyard. So, and that's going to be a video I'll make separately, actually. I'll cover that, because it was quite a good run, actually, playing with these guys, playing with guildies. And so, Feral Druid is, yeah, kind of fulfilling that niche a bit. Plus, a lot of the dungeons have shifted. 4 out of 8 dungeons are very, like, single-target heavy. So, Feral's, again, stepping up into that niche. So, good for Feral, just by everything artificially getting nerfed. Also, Survival Hunter and Warlock got nerfed a bit. They're still going to be really, really strong, and Feral is absolutely not going to be meta. It could still stand to take a bit of a buff, just from a community perception standpoint. I think that it needs a buff just for people to understand, like, oh, it's actually doing pretty well. But I think Feral's in pretty good hands right now. I think it's looking pretty good. So you should be pretty happy that it's that's working out okay right now. It's definitely worth trying, definitely worth picking up. And we'll see in the coming weeks whether I still have this opinion. Obviously, it's early on in the season. Maybe I've been really lucky with gear. I'm like 292 or something I'm level right now, 291, something like that. But I got very lucky with like a weapon first week from my vault. I've been lucky with like trinkets, been lucky with necklace, been lucky with just tier set pieces as well. So I've gained quite a good amount of just like stats and power just from early gear. So maybe I've been a bit lucky. Maybe as things go by in the coming weeks, I'll actually change my mind and say actually Feral hasn't scaled that well, and we don't really anticipate it to scale that well. But we'll see. But that's my quick rundown of everything. Hopefully this video has left you a little bit more with a bit more clarity on what's a run and what I'm trying out. Again, I'm still testing things. I'm sure a couple more weeks of testing and we'll have like, right, this is 100% your best in slot Feral build. But we're still kind of, you know, still figuring that out a little bit. Things are going to shift and change and stuff as we adapt to the dungeons and the high level keys each week and different affixes and stuff. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you in the next one. Make sure to come check out my stream, twitch.tv/Psybear_TV, linked in the description. And hopefully you're enjoying the content on YouTube at the moment. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care.